Hi guys. So first off, can I get a show of hands? How many of us have seen a Disney live action remake movie, have heard of them, or have some sort of familiarity with these movies? So it's pretty much all of us.
So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what led me to critique Disney live action films, because on the surface they're great, but when we begin to look a little bit underneath, are they? That's the question. So kind of the purpose of my critique, while I was watching these movies and hearing the headlines, and obviously we're not going to be talking about the obvious like middle of West Virginia headlines that you see about how we shouldn't make a black mermaid because that's, taking away from white people. That's not the purpose of my critique. The purpose of my critique is to actually look more into why we're choosing to simply swap out one race for another in these live action movies instead of simply writing these minority communities who already are underrepresented stories of their own. And if this is really just lazy on the part of Disney and its writers. So this is Disney's statement of diversity and inclusion. And it says, quote, "Disney is committed to celebrating an inclusive, respectful world. We create authentic and unforgettable stories, characters, experiences, and products that capture the imagination of our global audiences." But I kind of wonder, reading this statement, are we capturing the imagination of our global audiences, or are we capturing the imagination of our majority audiences, i.e. white people? So this is kind of some Disney diversity through history. So in 1943, you had Saludos Amigos, which was the first Disney movie to feature another culture. And then 20 years later, you got The Jungle Book, and the only other movie besides Saludos Amigos and its sequel, The Three Caballeros, to feature a different race. And then about 30 years later, we had Aladdin, which featured Disney's take on Arabian culture, which, I mean, a whole other presentation for another time, but that's just not really Arabian culture, but sure. And then in 2009, we had The Princess and the Frog, which is the first and only black Disney princess written for her own story. And Ariel was not written black, so I'm not counting Halle Bailey in that point. But also, Tiana was a frog for like the majority of the movie. So there's great representation all around, really, with that. And so live action remakes may actually be really helpful. It can provide representation to minority communities that they would not otherwise have. And colorblind casting can provide more opportunities for actors and actresses of different races. But it also allows younger audiences to be able to grow up with characters who look like themselves. I know that I was privileged enough growing up to not really have a shortage of characters who was white, brown hair, brown eyes. It's pretty standard. Same with my sisters, white, blonde hair, blue eyes. We didn't really have that challenge, but you can recognize that other communities do not have that same privilege that I myself had growing up. But is the magic making becoming lazy? So, kind of keeping up with the trends, diversity in casting has become somewhat of a trend within the movie industry. It's a new buzzword. Disney is trying to show progressiveness by casting actors in roles that were not originally written for them. But are they lazy for following this trend, or even worse, is it simply a deep-rooted ideological issue that we have to change, which is a lot harder to change our ideologies than to simply change our work ethic? So what is being said? What does diverse casting communicate when exchanging classic characters for the sake of representation? Are we telling different ethnic communities that they are simply replacement for white characters and that they don't deserve their own stories? Racial diversity is not being achieved by simply swapping one race for another. It's not a return at the grocery store. It's not that simple. And it minimizes minority talent by not creating new stories and plots that feature their rich cultures and rich heritages. One example I want to look at is the upcoming Disney's live action Snow White. And I've titled this slide "An Apple a Day Keeps the Audience Away." I was really proud of that title, guys. So thanks for the laugh. I appreciate it. So Disney is recently attempting to create a live-action Snow White. And I say attempting because, I mean, they've already pushed the date back like twice, and it's not coming out until like spring 2025 at this point. So we'll see if it comes. Snow White is set to be played by Latina actress Rachel Zegler. She played Lucy Baird in the newest Hunger Games movie. That's who that is. She also is quite famous for having really horrible PR training while talking about Snow White. So we're not going to talk about that, but that's probably what you would know her for. There has not yet been a Latina princess in the official princess lineup with her own story. Some people do kind of include Elena of Avalor in the princess lineup, but one of the main requirements to be an official Disney princess is you have to have your own movie and not be made for TV. And since she was made for TV as a children's cartoon on Disney Junior, I don't really think that we can fairly count her as an official Disney princess. The film has faced early criticism because they originally casted actors of various heights to play the seven dwarfs instead of people a part of that community. So, 6 feet tall guys playing the seven dwarfs. Issue there. But the studio has corrected this. Instead of using people as various heights, we have now shifted into using CGI instead of actually just casting the real people and choosing actors and actresses from that community who have so much talent. We're going to make them animated, don't you worry. So that has caused even more criticism. So here are my solutions. Again, I'm really proud of my title name, so if you guys could think, yeah. So this is how I think that we can improve the issues of diversity, but I don't work for Disney, and I'm 20 years old, so they can take my advice or they cannot. But I think that instead of just exchanging a white character for a character of a different race, we should alter the entire culture of the story to provide more representation and awareness. So if you're going to take a movie like Snow White and you're going to cast a woman of color in the main role, it's not that hard to change the entire culture of the story and reflect the Latin culture. Same with Halle Bailey. It's not that hard to change our entire cultures, but we're just not doing it. They're not taking the time to write it. Or we could create more new stories surrounding different cultures, like Encanto, Raya and the Last Dragon, or Moana, which have arguably been great successes for Disney. So obviously it works, and featuring other cultures work and makes them money. Which again, are we lazy for not doing it, or do they just not want to do it? And I feel like doing that would provide more representation for minority groups. And while the live action remakes are great now, I just don't think that this should be our stopping point. I think that we have a long way to go to work towards Disney bettering their diversity.